Hello, welcome to my channel Devops with Prasanna. This is day 17 in Learn AWS in 30 Days series. And today we are going to talk about AWS CLI. And this is going to be a complete hands-on session where I'm going to show you some of the advanced features in AWS CLI. Along with the AWS CLI, I'm going to showcase some of the tools which I use on regular basis, like TLDR and then JQ. Cool, let's get started. In today's session, this is the AWS CLI commands which we are going to execute. As you can see, there are some advanced concepts involved here, and it's going to be pretty interesting. Before going into the session, I have a small request from you. If you find the sessions to be useful, if you like the way I teach, please let me know in the comments. Also, if you have any feedback on things which I have to improve or what I should talk about, please let me know that in the comments as well. It will be very helpful for me to validate the teaching method which I use. And one more request is I have a Telegram group. Please feel free to join the Telegram group. I'll be posting information about the sessions which I'm planning and the background information about how I'm creating those sessions. So yeah, consider joining the Telegram group as well. And please let me know your thoughts and comments. Yeah, now we'll get into the session. Ways to access AWS resources. So there are different ways in which you can manage the AWS resources, like creation of resources, deletion, or updation. So till now, we have seen one method, which is AWS Console. We are logging into AWS Console, and then we created the resources there. So that is one of the methods to manage AWS. Okay. We'll talk about the other ways in which we can access. The next method is command line. So from our terminal, local terminal, we could able to talk to AWS, and then we could able to create, delete, or update the resources there. This is what we are going to see in depth today. Okay. The next method is IAC. IAC stands for Infrastructure as Code. So there is AWS solution for IAC, which is called as CloudFormation. So we'll try to look at CloudFormation in the next sessions. But today's session, I'll give a very short introduction about IAC. So it is similar to programming language, but it has a modern construct which is very specific to cloud. And it has some state and things like that. So we'll talk about IAC in detail in the next sessions. Okay. The next method is AWS Cloudshell. So Cloudshell is equivalent to command line, except that Cloudshell is a service provided by AWS itself, which means from the browser, you could able to start the Cloudshell command line, which is a browser-based command line. And it has like certain tools installed by default. For example, AWS CLI or Python, Node.js, all these things are installed by default. So, and we don't need to set up any kind of keys there because you are logged into console. All the necessary permissions are set by default. So this is an easy way to get started. We'll look into the Cloudshell in detail. The next method is AWS SDK using Python. So this is a programmatic access to manage the AWS resources. For example, let's say you want to give the permission to manage the EC2 instance to your end user. So as a scenario, like you'll create a form, the UI, which the end user can fill in the details. And once that is done, your backend will talk to AWS and create the necessary resources. For example, EC2 instance or S3 bucket and things like that. So that is the programmatic access, which can be like using any kind of language. It can be using Python, Node.js. There are a lot of SDK. SDK stands for Software Development Kit. Lot of libraries available for each and every language. So cool. So these are the different methods in which you can manage the AWS resources. Cool. So there are different ways in which you can authenticate to manage the AWS resources. For example, if you are using AWS Console, then as we have seen, like we will be using username and password, which is the IAM users credentials. And then we'll be logging into the console and managing the resources based on our permission. For AWS CLI, like we are going to use something called as access key and secret key. So this is also tied to your IAM user. which means all the permissions which we have defined for a IAM user applies to this keys also. But it is not the username and password, it's an access key and secret key. If you are going to use SDK or programmatic access, there are two ways. One is either you can use access key and secret key. Mostly for your local machine, you will be like using the access key and secret key. But for the applications installed within the AWS, you will always use IAM roles. So we'll see about IAM roles and how to set this up in the IAM deep dive session. Okay. But using IAM roles is a best practice when you deploy an application within the AWS itself and it's going to manage the other AWS resources. Okay, cool. So next we are going to talk about AWS CLI setup. But before that, if you don't want to set this CLI in your local, you can create the Cloudshell and access the AWS resources from there. It should work fine. Like whatever the exercise which we are going to do, it will work from Cloudshell or it can work from your local console also. Yeah, AWS Cloudshell. So once you logged into your AWS console, you can go to Cloudshell and click on this one. So you will be taken to a page where AWS will provision an environment for you, which will have the necessary tools like CLI, AWS CLI, Python, and then Node.js. And you'll be having the corresponding permissions tied to your IAM user. Okay. So in this case, we have a command line, browser-based command line now. So I can say something like AWS S3 LS. And I should get back the results properly because I have the administrator access. So we are going to talk about this command structure in detail in few minutes. But this is something which you can use if you don't want to set up CLI in your local. AWS CLI setup. So if you want to set up your local terminal to point to AWS, these are the 4 steps which you have to do. First is create your access key and secret key for your tied to your IAM user. Second one is install the CLI. Third one is configure the CLI. And then fourth one is like setting the right profile. We'll do this quickly now. So I'll go to my AWS console. I'll go to IAM. And here I'll go to my user. So this is my user. Also, it is always recommended to use IAM user. Please don't use a root user account. Okay. Always try to use IAM user, create IAM user and try to use that for all the exercise purpose. Okay. So if you go to your IAM user page, you can see something called as security credentials. So you can go here. There are like you can set up MFA and things like that, but we are focused on this access keys. So I already have 2 access keys. I'm going to create one more access key now. Okay, so you can have maximum of 2 access keys. So I'll remove one access key, demo purpose only. Okay, I'll deactivate. Okay, I'll delete this also. Okay, so a warning before creating the access key. This secret key and access key is a confidential information. So you should not share this with anyone. And for this demo purpose, I'll create a key and then I'll destroy the key once the demo is over. So you can also like do the same. If you're going to have the keys for long time usage, please delete, make sure it's stored in a confidential place. Okay, so I'm going to create a key for my command line usage. This is fine. Demo purpose only. Create the keys. Okay, cool. So we have the keys. I'm showing this because it's going to be for the temporary usage. Okay, done. So we have 2 keys now. One is my local machine, the other one is a demo purpose. Cool. Now we want to install AWS CLI. So install AWS CLI version 2. Make sure you are installing version 2 because that is the version which we are going to use. There are a lot of difference between version 1 and version 2. So install V2 version. So if you go here, you can find the setup. For example, for Mac, I can use these two lines. Like I can download this installer package and then I can do the installation. So I have already completed this step. To verify that, I'll say AWS -- version. So you can see I got the AWS version. It should start with 2. That is the important thing. The other things can vary. It is fine. Cool. So once you are done with this step and you can verify the AWS CLI is proper, then we'll go to the next step of configuring the AWS CLI. So for that, we'll do AWS configure. So this will ask for the AWS access key, which we got from the previous step. So this is my access key. This is my secret key. Yeah, South 1 is my default region. I don't have the default output format. So when I do this configuration part, it will store the credentials in this file. So AWS credentials. So this is a file in which my secrets will be stored. I can view this file to see the structure quickly. So it's saying world of Prasanna, and then this is access key and secret key. So if you want to use this as a default AWS account, like meaning if you from your local terminal, you just want to point to this account always, then you can convert this world of Prasanna or whatever the key or whatever thing which you have created to default. So if you have it as default, this is going to be your default AWS account, which your CLI will talk to. But it is always recommended to do it as like world of Prasanna or like whatever your account name is, because you can be conscious about to which AWS you're connecting to. In case you're connecting to multiple accounts, there is a chance like you might point to a different AWS account and create or update the resources wrongly. So to avoid that, it's always recommended to have a profile attached to it. So in this case, the profile name is world of Prasanna 1, which means whenever I want to run some of the AWS commands, I'll use the AWS profile as world of Prasanna 1, and then I can run the commands now. If I say AWS S3 LS, you can see I'm pointing to my AWS account and got back the S3 buckets properly. So in today's demo, we are going to create a EC2 instance, and this EC2 instance requires some of the other attributes also. So we'll see how to get the VPC information using AWS CLI and how to get the subnet information. If you see like there could be multiple subnets, we'll try to get the subnet which we are interested in. So there is going to be some kind of filtering criteria. And then we'll create a security group, and we'll also allow the SSH access to that security group. And we are going to get a AMI ID. AMI stands for Amazon Machine Image. So this is going to be the determine the OS and other type. So this is the AMI which we are going to use for our EC2 instance. And finally, we are going to create this EC2 instance using all the above parameters. And finally, we are going to terminate that EC2 instance also. And the good part is we are going to do all these things from the CLI itself. There is no UI which is needed for this. We'll use AWS Console just to make sure everything is created properly. Okay. So in this demo, first we are going to create a VPC ID. But before that, we'll quickly see the structure of this AWS commands. If I say AWS, let's say I'll say a very simple command, S3 LS. Okay. So what this means is AWS is the tool which we are going to use, AWS CLI. And the subcommand S3 denotes the resource which you're going to operate on. So you're going to operate on S3 resource. And we are going to run the command called ls in this resource S3. So if you are going to create a bucket or something like that, you will say AWS S3 and then create bucket, or like MB for make bucket or things like that. But it's going to follow the similar structure. So what is the command line utility? AWS. What is the resource it's going to operate on? S3. What is the command it's going to execute? ls. Okay, cool. So the first command for us is describing the VPCs. Okay, I'll execute this and then I'll explain you what it's doing. So we could able to see the output and there is a VPC ID which got returned for us. Okay. Now we'll try to understand this one. So the CLI is AWS, it's fine. EC2 is a resource, AWS resource, it's going to act upon. That is also good. It's going to say describe VPCs. Okay. Maybe we should run this command first and see how the output would be. If I do this, you can see there is a lot of information here. So there is a key called as VPCs in this map, and it is an array, which means we said describe VPCs for this AWS account. Okay, so that could be more than one VPCs. In that case, all the VPCs would be listed here, and each and every VPC will have this information: CADR block, DHCP options ID, and things like that. That is a key called VPC ID also, which we are interested in. Okay, so that's why this command says ---- query, which means I'm interested only in VPCs of star. If I put an angle bracket and then if I give a star inside it, get all the VPCs, and for all the VPCs get only the VPC ID. But in this case we are seeing only one output because there is only one VPC, which means this command is equivalent to typing this command dot VPC ID. Okay, and maybe like I will talk about this output in a bit. Okay, if I specify this command, I'll be getting the result also. So I got the result as VPC. Because there is only one thing, I can index it using the array index of of 0, square bracket of 0. So there are, now we'll come to this output part. So there are different formats in which we can output the information. So by default, if you see, the output here is having the double quotes, but we don't want to have the double quotes. We want to have it in a plain text format. So we can use this output of this command in the subsequent commands. Okay, so we are saying output as text, and we can get the VPC ID without the double quotes. Okay, cool. So now the next command for us is, we'll come to this part in a bit. Okay, it's going to use a tool called as JQ. We'll come to this in a few minutes. The next one is like get all the subnets, but we don't want to get all the subnets in our system. We want to get the subnets which belong to this corresponding VPC or ID of 0. Okay, so that is like one more option which we are giving, which is called as filter. So in filter, we are saying the name is VPC ID, which is for this particular field. The value should be $VPC ID. So where this $VPC ID is coming. So what we are going to do is we are going to store the output of previous command and store it in a variable called VPC_ID and pass this as an input to the next command. Okay, so for this, I'll copy this one. I'll say VPC_ID. To get the output of a command and store it in a variable, we are going to use the shell script notation, which is like $, and within this parenthesis, we'll have the command executed. So it will execute the command, get the output, store it in a variable called VPC ID. So that's what it's going to do. So to check if we have the proper value, we'll say echo $VPC_ID. Yeah. So actually, like I'm planning to have one DevOps session where I'm going to go in depth into all the shell commands like this, like what are the various ways, what are the various options we have with the shell and command line utility. Okay. But as of now, like if you can put this in a $ in parenthesis, it will execute this command and store the result in VPC ID. So that's what you have to know. Cool. So now our VPC ID variable has this value. What I'll do is I'll use this in the subsequent command. I'll say EC2 describe subnets. And if you can see, like I'm doing a multi-line command. This is possible because at the end, I'm giving a slash here. So which means I'm telling the terminal that the command is not over. It will go to the next line also. So EC2 describe subnets, and then I'm giving a filter option, which will say for this VPC ID, for this value, filter me all the subnets. And I'm saying like get only the subnet 2, but instead I'll say Maybe first I'll say get me all the subnets. So for that I'll say star and give me the output in the text format. So if I do this, you can see we have 3 subnets, okay, and separated by tab space. If you don't want to have tab space, I'll just remove this output, which will be the default format, and we can get it in the array itself. So this is the first subnet, second subnet, and third subnet. Cool. So I'll copy this one. So what I'm going to do is subnet underscore ID. I'm going to store this in a variable again. And I'm going to get the subnet ID 2 and store the subnet ID in a variable called subnet underscore ID. Cool. If I execute this, I'll have the result in this variable subnet underscore ID. Okay, cool now. So we have two variables now. One is VPC underscore ID. The other one is subnet underscore ID. This is what we are going to use in the further commands. The next one is to create a security group. Okay. Again, this is going to follow the same structure. AWS EC2 is a resource, and the command it's going to execute is create security group. Maybe I think it's a right time to show you how to understand or how to find what are the commands available. Okay. So I'll go to the AWS CLI docs. AWS CLI. If you want to look for commands in EC2 instance, you can type EC2. And you can go to the AWS CLI command line reference. Okay. And you can see for AWS EC2, these are the commands available. Okay. So there are a lot of commands available. And from here, I got something like describe VPCs, -VPCs. Okay. And if I go into describe VPC, I'll know about what are the options available. So we just use 2 options now. One is filters and the other one is this output. Okay. But you can do a query. You can query by filter VPC ID also. You can do a rerun. There are a lot of other things which are available, which you can read about read in this documentation itself. So it's a very elaborate documentation along with examples. So this is a very good tool. But sometimes this could be overwhelming. Okay. So you will be in a hurry, but it's very difficult to read this documentation. So in that case, what I'll do is I use a command CLI tool called TLDR. It is too long, didn't read. Okay, it's a short form for that. So if I say TLDR AWS, you can see I got the top commands which are available in AWS, which is AWS configure, AWS STS, Dynamo, IAM, and things like that. If I want to get for EC2, I'll say TLDR AWS EC2, which will just list me all the top commands used here with a one-line description. For example, describe instances, display information about all instances, which is very easy, right? So for example, you can say AWS EC2 describe instances, and I'll get back the information like for all the instances I have, it will give me the output. So this TLDR is a very cool utility. And the advantage here is it will not it's not meant only for AWS. You can do it for any command. For example, you can say TLDR cat. So for all the command line utilities, you can use TLDR. So it will say cat path to file, which means it will print the contents of the file to standard output. And you can do a concatenation. You can append to a file. So you can do all these things. So you can check this out. TLDR command line. And you can find this GitHub page. And it has a very good documentation also. Yeah, so you can please feel free to check this out. Cool. Now we came to this part. Okay. So this is how I'll be using the AWS docs, or I'll be using TLDR to know about the commands available. So here I'm going to create a security group. The name is created from CLI. Description is this tag specification. So I'm going to say resource type as security group. For this resource, I'm going to create a tag called name with this value, which is good. And I'm going to create the security group in this VPC ID. So I'll select this. I'll run this command. And you can see we got the group ID available. Maybe I think it's a good time to show you like one more utility which I'm using often. Okay. Okay, because it's a create command, I don't want to do this. Maybe I'll store this in a variable by myself. Okay. So I'll say export security group ID equal to this value. See, I can show you this command with a create security group itself, but it will unnecessarily create more security groups, which I don't want to do. We say security group underscore ID. You can see we have the value for it. But I'll show you one more utility command, which is very, very useful for me, which is called JQ. So first, I'll not print this one. If I say EC2 describe VPCs, and then this symbol is called as pipe symbol. This also belongs to the Unix operating system, which means it's available in Linux also and Mac as well. So what it'll do is it'll take the output of this first command and then give it as an input to the second command. So that's what it's going to do. So when I say AWS EC2 describe VPCs and pipe to JQ, you can see it will print the output in a neat format. So it will have the keys as blue and then values as green. And I can do a filtering here. Okay, so if I do this, you can see this is my options available. Let's say I want to get the CADR block, the value for the CADR block, which means what I have to do is dot VPCs. This VPCs denote this key. And because this is an array, I want to select the first element within that array. And within that, I want to access this key. And if I do this, I can get back the value. So it is like a very human readable format. Okay. This is called JSON parser. And you can get this JSON parser here. It's a lightweight, flexible command line JSON processor. Okay. This is called JQ. So similarly, there is a tool called YQ, which is a YAML processor. It is similar to JQ, but it's for YAML. Okay, this is very useful when we are going to look into the Kubernetes sessions. Cool. Now we created the security group. Maybe I think I'll show you in the UI how the security group looks like. Okay, I'm in the security group page. Now if I search for created from CLI. Okay, why it's created two things, I don't know. But I don't want to have this. Oh, does not exist. So I should refresh. Okay. So created from CLI. That is only one security group. And if I select this, maybe I'll just refresh this page. If I select this, you can see the inbound rules as empty. So there are no inbound rules. We want to attach one inbound rule, which will say like for this group ID, whatever the security group ID which we have, open the port 22 for the CADR range. If you want to understand more about CADR, we have talked the detail in the session 3. So I'll link that session here so you can go and look at that session. But it's going to open the port 22 for everyone. So instead of hard coding the security group here, I'll say $security underscore group underscore ID address. And this is what it is. Okay, yeah. Cool. So I'll copy this one. I'll say this. Cool. So it could able to create the security group rule, and then we got back the successful message also, which means if I go here and if I refresh this page, if I refresh this, you can see there is one rule which got added, which is a TCP SSH allowed from any source. This looks good. Maybe like we'll quickly describe this resource also. Okay, so we got a lot of information here. I think like it's a good time to maybe like to see it one more time in the usage of that query option. So we want to select the group name. Okay, let's say how we can select this group name. It is first we have to select the group IDs, security groups, within the security group, we should get the first map. In that map, we have the group name. Okay. So this time I'm going to use something called as query, hyphen query, and this query is of format security groups. And then because it's array, I'm going to select the first element in that array. And then I'm going to say group name. Okay. So I just want to query this one, not the whole thing. If I do this, I can get the created from CLI. But I want to output this in a text format. Okay, so we got the text format of this. Cool. So this is how we can do this. And the next one which we want to do is the fetch the AMI. As we say, AMI stands for Amazon Machine Image. Okay. Again, this command is going to be the same. So I'll just execute this command. But there are like more than one filter criteria here. So I'll quickly explain that one. So in the filter criteria, I'm saying the name, the name of the field is name. The value is Ubuntu images HVM SSD of Ubuntu. And then this is the first filtering criteria. Okay. The second filtering criteria is the root device type should have the value of EBS. The next criteria is architecture should be x86 then 64. And within that, select the first image ID. But maybe I'll say star. Okay. I'll say it as star. Okay. Which means I want to select all the image IDs. If I do this, okay, which means there is no AMA available for this particular criteria. Okay, so to make this AMA fetching simple, I'll just update the filtering criteria. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go to one of my EC2 instance. I'll go to my AMI. This is AMI ID. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just copy this and filter by AMI ID itself. So because if you see here, there are a lot of options available, or I can filter it based on this particular name, whatever the name which we have here. So instead of this name, I'll specify the name as this particular one, and I'll try to select the 0th value. I'll first see what is the result which we are going to get. Okay, so we got the output. Now what I'll do is I'll say hyphen output as text, and then save it as AMI underscore ID. Okay. So if I say echo $AMI underscore ID, cool, we got the result. Now we are coming to the last piece, which is to create the EC2 instance. Okay. So when creating the EC2 instance, we are going to give AMI underscore ID. We are going to say create one machine, create machine of this type. This is my key. This is a PEM file which I'm going to use. Security group ID should be $security underscore group underscore ID. Subnet is going to be $subnet underscore ID. And then block device mapping. So if you can see, this is a slightly complicated structure because we are going to create a EBS volume for this EC2 instance. And we are going to specify this as an array because we can create multiple volumes attached to a EC2 instance. So the device name is dev SDF. The EBS volume size is going to be 30 and delete on termination is going to be false. So these are the properties we are giving for EBS volume, and we are going to create one EBS volume which will be attached to this machine. And similarly for the tag specification, we are going to the resource type is instance and the tag is name is EC2 from CLI. Okay, and then for volume, we are going to say my disk. This is a tag which will be attached to this EBS volume. Okay, maybe I'll say my disk -1. Cool. I think all the other things can be passed as a parameter. All the security group ID, subnet ID, and then EN ID. So if we go here, I give this. Cool. So you can see like one EC2 instance got created, but the output contains a lot of information, which is about the corresponding instance which we created. But there are a few things which we want to check, which are the state of this EC2 instance, state reason. It is in pending state, which means it's getting created now. And then the name is going to be EC2 from CLI, which is good. Yeah, so this will be useful for us to go and check in the console. So if I go here, you can see there is one EC2 instance which got created, EC2 from CLI, and this will have the proper attribute set. So it will be attached to the subnet which we specified. So this subnet is having this subnet key, which is ending with E06. Okay. If I go here, I say echo subnet underscore ID E06, which is cool. And if I go to security, you can see it was attached to our security group created from CLI. So this is also good, which means it has support on it to open. This is great. So we could able to create our EC2 instance. And in the next step, maybe we'll try to describe the EC2 instance also. So I'll say there is only a slight difference here. We saw a lot of describe instances before, and we saw the filters query also. But in this case, I'm going to output in the table format, not in the normal text format which we have. So we'll see what happens here. I think this has to be in star. Not sure why it is like this. Okay, and I think this flight link is also wrong. Okay, cool. Okay, I try to run this. You can see we are getting the output in table format and not in the plain text format. The plain text format is used to store it in a variable, but this kind of output will be making the output in a presentable format for us to read. So describe instance status, instance ID is this, and status like running and stop. So in our case, there are two instances which are running. We'll quickly go and see our instance ID. So it is ending with, maybe I'll copy this instance ID. If I search for this, this is our instance and it is in the running state. Okay, that is great. So I think we reached the end of our session. The last piece here is to delete that instance. So what I'll do is I'll just call the terminate instance command, and I'll pass only my instance ID, which was created in the previous step. So if I do this, you can see the previous state was running and the current state is shutting down. Okay, so which means it started terminating the EC2 instance. If I describe this instance now, you can see for our specific instance, it's in the shutting down phase. Okay, I think cool. We reached the end of this demo. I hope you had a very good understanding of AWS CLI now. AWS Console versus AWS CLI. So before wrapping up the session, I just want to talk about what are the advantages of using CLI, what are the advantages of using Console. Okay, Console in the sense it's a UI. So Console, AWS Console is very easy to get started because it's a UI. A beginner can go and easily create the resources or manage the resources. So it is easy to get started. But for CLI, that is always a learning curve. You have to understand the commands. You have to set up things in your local, or you can use Cloudshell and run the commands. But you have to read the documentation and make sure you understand the things properly. It is slightly more secure than CLI because, for example, if you are going to use CLI from your local, you'll be downloading the access key and secret key. There is a chance like this access key and secret key can be leaked and someone can impersonate you and then create the resources. But if you make sure like the keys are in a secure place, there is no need to worry about that. But there is a slight chance of the keys getting leaked. So it is slightly less secure than CLI. But if you use Cloudshell, then it's well and good. And in case of CLI, the setup process may take some time to install the CLI in your local and configure the CLI. So it will take some time to get started. Okay, in the UI is a time-consuming process because if you want to create more resources, you have to go and click and do each and everything in different pages. Okay. For example, for EC2 instance, it can go to multiple pages, or in case of Kubernetes, it will definitely go to a lot of pages. But if you're using CLI, it's much more easier to create it. And if you do a lot of things in the UI, it is called as ClickOps, not DevOps, which means like you're going and clicking a lot of things rather than doing it in an efficient way. Okay. But in case of AWS CLI, the resource creation can be automated, which means it will be more efficient and it will not be a time consuming thing. You will spend more time in writing the code rather than creating the resources. And no automation, and there is like a lot of repetitions. If you want to create 10 machines, there is a chance like you have to go through the tedious process of creating machines 10 times. And the next part is like it's prone to human errors. So for example, you are creating 10 EC2 instances. There is a high chance like you might miss some of the configuration because you are a human at the end of the day. But if it's CLI, the chances of error is very less because it's a machine which is creating all the things for us. And CLI enables automation and it's an efficient way to manage resources. So these are the differences which you should know when using the CLI and console. But there is one more concept which is called as IAC, which we discussed, which we slightly touched upon at the starting. In most of the projects which I worked on, I'll be using the IAC tool, not even the direct CLI. Only in rare and specific scenarios, then only I'll go for CLI. But to debug the things, I'll always use CLI. I'll not go with the IAC. So in the next session, we'll talk about the IAC, infrastructure as code, and we'll see the difference between the infrastructure code usage and the CLI usage. So we reached the end of the session. I hope you understand CLI in a lot better way now. If you find this sessions to be useful, please consider subscribing to it and please share it with your friends. Happy learning. Bye-bye.